Hey everybody, got another video for you this week. As you can see, we're practicing social distancing here at GFS, keeping things safe. Today we're going to talk to you a little bit about lighting, but first I'll let Andrew introduce himself and kind of explains what he does here at our company.
Sure. My name's Andy Marum. I'm a mechanical engineer here. I do have probably the most experience in our group right now with the lighting solutions that we provide. Been here for about 9 years now. So know a little bit, probably not everything, but I'll do my best to answer any questions.
Sounds good. The main thing we're going to talk about, like I said, is lighting. If you look behind us, you can actually see the two different kinds of lighting we're going to be talking about. You'll see on Andrew's side, the hue is a little bit different, the brightness is a little bit different, and then on my side it's a little bit brighter, and the light hue is a little bit brighter as well. So we have our T8s, our standard fluorescent type lighting on that side, and these are LEDs here. But what are the main differences between LED and T8 bulbs?
Sure. So the key, T8 is really a form factor. So that the T8 indicates it's a tube, and the 8 is a dimension of the tube. So both fixtures actually use a T8 type bulb. These are T8 LEDs and these are T8 fluorescent tubes. So the fluorescent is a gas inside a glass tube that takes a high voltage. It arcs across the gas heats up and it emits a light. The LED tubes over here actually convert the voltage. We're using GFS lights in this booth. The way we've designed our lights is we run them on a standard T8 fluorescent fixture, which uses a high voltage ballast. The tubes themselves will have a board something like this inside. It'll have individual LED diodes, light emitting diodes on it. The voltage from the ballast is a high voltage. The board will convert it to a lower voltage that the LEDs use, and we'll have the light coming out of the tube as you see here. So that's the main difference in the technology behind it. The efficiency of the LEDs is higher than fluorescent. When they first came out, even 4 or 5 years ago, they were kind of on parity. But today, you will get more lumens per watt on an LED fixture. So that's one of the primary benefits of the LEDs, is that you get a much more efficient fixture. In this case, our LED tubes draw approximately 17 watts apiece for the tube itself. These fixtures happen to be a 6-tube fixture on this side. This side is a 4-tube fixture, and on a 4-tube fixture for fluorescents, we're drawing about approximately 32 watts per tube. So times 4, you're 128 watts or so on this side.
Okay.
So you get a significant energy savings, probably around 40% by going with the LED.
And there's even, I'm glad you brought that up just because we get asked a lot by shops what programs are out there if they switch to LEDs. We always say reach out to your state and your local area people, especially your power company. A lot of those have programs where there's been grant money set aside. There's tax programs where you can get some credits by switching to LED because of how much more efficient that they are. We had a local shop up in Minneapolis do that, and it basically paid for all of that stuff very quickly. So the ROI was very short on it, and then from there on out, they were just getting more and more efficient.
Absolutely. We typically don't try to stay up to speed on all the programs around the country because they vary greatly even by your energy provider. So it's very hard to stay on top of all the different programs that are out there. So again, check locally. That's the best way to see what's available in your area.
Another thing I get asked all the time, which maybe you know, is the lifespan shorter on an LED bulb because it's in a painting environment where we're elevating temperature?
It can be. So the lifespan of an LED is definitely dependent on the temperature of the diodes themselves. So we place them in the wall, so there's a glass panel separating it from the temperature in the booth. But obviously, if you're in a long cure cycle, it will heat up. The storage temperature we will not exceed. So what we typically do is we turn off the tubes when we are in cure mode. So if you do a cure mode and you have a post-cure purge, which will bring the temperatures back down before the lights illuminate, the effects of that temperature will not be very great at all. If you do cycle the lights on and off a significant amount of time in cure mode or at an elevated temperature, you could see a degradation in the lifespan.
Okay. And that's a pretty common one, so we get that all the time. Are there differences in the LEDs, or is there only one option? And what I mean by that is shops ask me a lot when they're replacing their fluorescent fixtures, or their bulbs, sorry. A lot of them sometimes want to go to their local hardware store, and they go in and there's a whole range of bulbs that they need to try to pick the correct one from. Is it the same on LEDs, or do we streamline that at all?
So yeah, there's compatibility out there. So you need to know what your ballast is. Usually you need an instant start ballast at a minimum to run an LED tube in a fluorescent fixture. But you will have to do the research, go in, look at the bulb brand you're looking at, the specific part number, compare that to your ballast manufacturer and what they recommend for allowable LED tubes for that, for that device. We do check ours, so everything we ship out is compatible.
So anyone who buys our fluorescent ballast, essentially our booth with fluorescent bulbs, can switch to LED without having to change the ballast?
Yes, they can, but there are specific types. There's a wide variety of LED, and this is one of the issues with LED right now. There's so many options with LED, and there's so many ways of implementing it that it's very hard to wrap your head around all the different possibilities as far as which voltages they can accept, which ones will work with these ballasts versus this type of ballast. So the easiest way is really to grab a tube, buy a small amount of tubes, go test it in your fixture, see if it works. That being said, I would still recommend that you go and try to do the research, see if the manufacturers recommend them as compatible devices. Just because it works right off the bat doesn't mean there might be something a little bit off that would shorten the lifespan or potentially cause problems.
And then one thing to pay attention to on the color side, so as you're out there doing that, looking at different bulbs, it's always best to go to your booth manufacturer because we're going to make sure you're getting the right bulb. So if you already have our booth, you have LEDs, you need to replace some, or you have the T8 bulbs and you're going to put the fluorescents, or the LEDs in, you can always get those directly from us, so it's correct. But I see a lot of people, and I get a lot of questions on fluorescent bulbs when they say, I'm going to go buy my own bulbs. What color temperature do I need, and which one should I get? Because a lot of people talk about color shift in the booth, and as a painter it was something I was worried about as well. The biggest thing is they usually have a diagram in there. You want the closest to natural sunlight, but the most important thing you do in your booth is not match color in your booth. It doesn't matter what bulbs are in there, what color hue, what temperature, none of that matters. You want to make sure you're still doing your paint verification and your color matching outside in natural sunlight, or if it is in your booth, make sure you turn the lights off and use one of the company's color matching lights. So like 3M has their sun gun, SATA has a great light as well, Innovative, they have lamps also that can be used for color matching. Make sure you're using something like that and not basing it off the color, or sorry, the lights that are in your actual paint booth. So next is on standards and certifications. We get a lot of questions on this. A lot of this came out recently with some of the Honda certifications. They do require a certain light level inside your entire shop, actually, not just your paint booth. When I talk about certifications, a lot of questions might come up. First one is, what is the CR rating on the LEDs versus the T8?
Sure. So our LED tubes are guaranteed to have a CRI of 82 or higher. Our fluorescents are at 85.
Okay.
So CRI is a color reproduction index. It tells you what width of the visible spectrum the bulb can produce. You can only see color that's reflected, so if you can't produce it, you can't see it reflected to you. And it's essentially, I'll simplify, it's essentially a percentage of the total spectrum that's emitted by like the sun, a natural, or the full spectrum. So both are fairly high. I think the devices you're talking about for matching in the booth are actually in the upper 90s or mid 90s.
Yeah, they're pretty high, and they're very, very tuned. So I mean, they do a lot of playing around with those as they develop the lights. It seems like better ones come out all the time, but yeah, those are very, very specific, and it would be overkill if you did that in a booth. First, it wouldn't be cost effective, and then to be able to maintain that correctness through the lifespan of those bulbs would be almost impossible. So that's why it's good to use those color.
Yeah, and it's a great point. It does degrade over time.
So we also get questions on our booths and when people retrofit, wanting to know if the ballasts work in both single skin booths and our dual skin booths.
Yeah, so we actually have two different fixtures. We have the, it's a LAB style, and that's the fixture that is in a full housing with a metal back, and it's for a single skin type booth.
So that's the type that mount externally from the outside.
Yep.
Right.
Well, you can mount them externally, but you actually will come through the interior. You'll cut a hole in the wall.
Okay.
You'll come through the internal opening. There's two flanges that you kind of slide up. It comes in and slides down the lower flange, or if you're going sideways, I think all auto finish booths are vertical.
Yeah.
So it'll slide in, you bend a tab and it's in place, and then there's a lens that bolts to it, and it pinches the skin of the booth. So in that case, you'll see the sheet metal outside. Those fixtures are very easy to retrofit. They come with a hole cut template and all the dimensions. Maybe it's not the full template, but they do give you the dimensions for what you need to cut the hole.
Sure.
And it's very easy to insert it in your way.
So they could pull out the old booths, that no matter what kind of booth they have, if they wanted to switch to our ballast, that's something that they could do and upgrade to
Absolutely.
LED?
Yeah, yep. For our insulated booths, it's a different type of fixture that we use. Obviously, we have the panel has an integrated opening in it, and then we put a reflector into that opening that has the ballast on it. But you could definitely pull all that out if you need to get the ballast. You could put them together. One thing to keep in mind if you are retrofitting and changing out ballast, you will have to use a certified electrician to maintain the ETL listing on the fixture. You just have to verify that all the wiring was done correctly and that there's no possibility of a short or a fire or something happening.
And that goes with a lot of the things we have. We do get asked that a lot. Even some of our Revo equipment. There's so many different kinds of plugs out there, especially in 220 single phase, that unit doesn't actually come with a plug on it because most of the time it's the wrong one. So anytime you're getting that stuff put in, you're changing something in your booth, exactly as Andrew said, you want to make sure you're getting a certified electrician to do that stuff, to ensure you're following code and just to double check and make sure everything's hooked up right. Especially in the automotive world, I know we all think we can do everything ourselves, and a lot of times we can. But as technical as some of these control panels and these things have gotten, if one little thing is out of place and you're getting the wrong voltage, or I mean, that can affect your amp draw. We've seen Revo lamps not get bright enough or get too bright, which affects how the temperature sensor and that stuff works. So just make sure it's done correctly to basically not have to worry about that stuff. All right, so let's get back to the certification while we have a short break in the questions here. I got to work with a few shops on their Honda certifications. And by certifications, for those of you who don't know, a lot of the car manufacturers, the actual OEMs, want to make sure their vehicles are repaired in the proper manner. So they're certifying individual shops to be a qualified repair center for that OEM brand. So Toyota or Honda, for example. If you want to be a certified shop, they need to come in and do an audit. They'll look over a lot of things, including even how much parking space you have for customers, if you have locked areas for their cars, if they're going to be parked outside and left overnight. They'll check your key drops, they check everything. But they have very specific standards, but you can actually find those audits online. A lot of them are available. If you don't have one, just call your local rep. They'll be able to help you and give you a heads up before they actually come in to do the audit to make sure you can get as much done on the upfront as possible. But one big thing that a lot of people were missing is actually lighting. So there's a huge lighting requirement section for these audits. Once that came out, we actually checked all of our equipment. We had Jeff Rafe-Schneider helped us a lot. So he works for our company. But Jeff actually went around and measured all of our painting locations here and our mix rooms to see what our light levels were and how those compare to what's required from these certification programs. When you're looking at Honda specifically, they measure in a quantity called lux. There's a lot of different ways to measure light. There's foot candles, a lot of different ones. But they measure in lux, and what they require in the paint booth is a minimum of 1,000 lux. So we went and tested ours. The one you see behind Andrew there is just above the minimum requirement. And that's about the least amount of light that we offer in an area. So that's 4 tube fixtures. It is the T8 bulbs. So that's about the least amount of lighting. There's no sidewall lights. And we are basically right at that minimum level. So the good news there is that's just an aluminum repair station. So any of our booths are going to be well above the minimum light requirement for certification. And most of our competitors should be, but it's always good to get it checked And always keep in mind that if you're going to be getting your certification, to just check it ahead of time. Don't play the guessing game, otherwise you have to fix stuff, then they have to come back in and do the audit over again. The booth behind me was well above, so I believe that one was at 1400 lux, something like that. And that's just a prep station, which you can paint in. Ours has a curtain front, you can put doors on them and basically make it into a booth. But the biggest thing is there's no sidewall lighting in there. Once we get into our main paint booth, that one was almost double. We were between 18 and 1900 lux, so well above the certification. The good news is there with our equipment and our premium line like that is, even as those things start to get dirty, if you're not the best at keeping the glass clean, changing bulbs when you should, you're still going to be well above that certification level. What a lot of people don't realize is there's also a certification light level in your mix rooms, your detail area, and your general metalworking area. And the metalworking area was fairly low. I believe it's around 400 lux is what they're looking for. We also do sell light fixtures for the general shop area as well. Always check your height, make sure you have enough of those things. A lot of shops, believe it or not, are below that 400 lux level that they're looking for, but it's very easy to get there. So make sure you check that. Our mix rooms, those are well above. They're looking for 750 lux in that area. Our booths are well above that. I can't speak to our competitors on that one. There's so many different arrays of lights I've seen in those things. And there's a lot of homemade mix rooms also. I see a lot of cinder block ones with a single standard like house bulb in there. That's probably not going to be bright enough. So make sure you're using a quality mix room, also one that's rated for paint. And again, next week, Jeff will get in a lot more detail on the paint mix rooms. And then last is the detail area. So make sure you have quality lights there as well, because that's also on the certification, and that's higher than the metalworking area. They actually want 750 lux minimum in the detail area. So that's the same as a mix room, so it's got to be pretty bright. You can't just curtain off a section of your shop anymore and call it good. You got to make sure it's set up properly to meet these certification requirements. And it's just a good thing to do in general, especially the detail area. That's your last line of defense before that car gets to the customer. It's very easy to brighten that up. You'll be able to see any small defect you may have missed prior. So those are always good to look at.
Yeah, I'll just add that if you do have a custom booth or something that's maybe a little different than or deviates significantly from our standards, all the fixtures we have been tested by a third party. So we have what are called IES files, which means we can run calculations for you specifically for whatever you have and guarantee that you will be at those levels or higher. So if you have something special, definitely send it our way and we can do the calc.
So it's something they can just email in, or you'd prefer that they call and talk first?
I'd prefer they call. There's a number of factors we have to get and information we need to run a calculation correctly. But it's not too daunting. It's pretty simple. So call in, we'll talk to you, and we'll figure it out.
Okay. Anything else you have to add before we close out for today?
Not really. I mean, there's a couple of big benefits we probably haven't talked about yet. Sure. For LED lights. One of the major ones is the instant on. I don't know if you've noticed that out here.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
If you turn on a fluorescent fixture, many times it can take 15 minutes, depending on your ballast and tube, but it can take up to 15 minutes or more for it to get to full brightness. So I've heard a lot of feedback actually that as soon as somebody puts LED lights in, they're surprised how bright it is right out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is, as soon as you turn the booth on, it's full brightness and it's instant. A lot of times you'll feel kind of hazy almost when you walk into a fluorescent booth right away. So I don't know if you've noticed that. I think it's a huge benefit, but you could speak more to what the painters see for benefit.
That's a really good point. Especially now, I mean, everything's about speed in a body shop. And when we're working with shops and trying to help them become more efficient, especially on the paint side, one of the big key factors is we never want to leave the paint booth empty. We always want to have a car, so when you come in the morning, you're painting right away. Unless you're in one of those locations where you have a prep guy that comes ahead of time and they get one taped up and ready for you. But we always want to leave a car in there ready to paint so we don't have that lull in the morning. So that's where that instant on becomes even more crucial. If you come on first thing in the morning, maybe it's a car you don't have to seal, you just have to blend into something. So you're going to be spraying color right away. We want to make sure we're at full brightness, and that's what those LEDs are going to do for you. You don't have to turn on and wait for everything to kind of wake up and get to full temperature brightness, I guess you could say. you're ready to go in and spray immediately.
Yeah, and connected with that, on a LED, on-off cycles doesn't affect the lifespan. So when you see the lifespans of an LED fixture, you may actually see, in some cases, the LED might be slightly lower than a fluorescent tube, but the fluorescent tube is affected. If you turn it on and off a number of times, the lifespan can be cut in half very rapidly. On an LED, not so much. It's gonna hold that 36,000, 48,000, 50-some thousand hour lifespan, no matter how many times you turn it on or off. So it should last much longer.
You can really see that in the diodes. I mean, I'm sure you've all had those lights. You can tell the fluorescent lights sometimes when they're about to go out. You'll turn your booth on, and you'll see a couple of lamps flicker a little bit longer, and then they kind of go on. All that goes away using a diode type system like in LEDs. That's a really good point as well.
So it's not all apples to apples when you're looking at spec sheets. Some of it's a little bit more involved than that, but LED has a lot of benefits. I highly recommend going to it if you have any questions. I would default to LED every time.
Yeah.
And in the future, there's not going to be an option. Obviously, at some point, it's going to switch over.
Yes.
And everything will be LED.
And that's a great point as well. I mean, keep that in mind. We've seen it with different light fixtures and bulbs, how they change over time, and all of a sudden, the old stuff just becomes obsolete. LEDs were very expensive, but now when you look at our booths, especially if you're in the buying process of a new booth and you're trying to decide between the two, there really isn't much of a price difference anymore when you're switching from the T8s to the LEDs. The price difference, there will be some depending on how many of those bulbs you want in there, but as far as a straight transfer from one to the other, that difference is becoming less and less significant all the time. And again, there's government programs out there, so check into those because you could get a reimbursement in your taxes or another type of credit or even a grant for your shop to convert to those more efficient ways.
Absolutely.
Like always, if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to one of us directly or just straight to GFS. Our tech people are phenomenal. They're doing a good job. They're working through this whole COVID situation, so we do still have people on staff to answer your questions in those areas. Keep reaching out, even in the comments section below. Other topics that you want to hear from us on during this time. We have a lot planned for you guys. We have some pretty cool stuff coming up. So again, thanks for coming by, and we'll see you again soon.